Another important thing to know is that you can place walls pretty far from yourself as well. Try standing still a layer below the sentry here, and hold out your walls. Then look straight up. Notice how you can place a wall in front of the sentry. That is basically called a high wall. You can use high walls in so many different situations, to block shots from people above you, to get a wall on an enemy above you, just like you just did. Now it's time to understand right-hand peeks, which is one of the most important things to get down. Position yourself to the left of the window here. Try to make it so that the sentry can't see you. If you quickly walk to the right, take a shot, and then reset the wall, that is an example of a right-hand peek. In the next section of tutorials, we're going to be completely focusing on peeks. The first peek we're going over is one of the most common. It's called a peanut butter. It's cut in diagonals. To do this peek, you want to make the triangle, but when you confirm that triangle edit, make sure you're off to the left. If you're not far enough off to the left, the enemy's going to have an angle on you, and they're going to shoot you. Once you make the edit, you want to jump upwards and to the left while taking the shot. And as soon as you shoot, reset your wall. For all the peeks we're going to be going over, always try to reset your wall after taking your shot. That way, if your shot doesn't... The second peek is a window peek. Now, there's something you need to know. Try editing a window on the far right, and then make a far left, and then make one in the middle. Notice how the middle window peek is a lot bigger than the other two. This means you need to be careful whenever you do a middle window peek, simply because if you're not far enough off to the left, the enemy's gonna have an angle on you and they're gonna shoot. So practice some different window peeks here, and when you feel comfortable, move on to the next one. Second peek is a window peek. Now there's something you need to know. Try editing a window on the far right, and then make a far left, and then make one in the middle. Notice how the middle window peek is a lot bigger than the other two. This means you need to be careful whenever you do a middle window peek, simply because if you're not far enough off to the left, the enemy's gonna have an angle on you and they're gonna shoot. So practice some different window peeks here, and when you feel comfortable, move on to the next one. This peek is called a low wall. The way you do this peek is you crouch underneath the wall and then go up to take the peek. Try placing a cone underneath you while doing this peek, because typically when you're in a fight, you're going to want to have a cone in your box, otherwise the enemy might be able to put a ramp over you. So practice setting up this peek and all the rest of them with cones in your box. That way you can get some variety practice. What about when you have piece control above the enemy? This is the type of edit you want to do. Edit the right tiles of your floor and cones and stand off to the left. A lot of times in this situation, the enemy is going to try to jump up in the place that you edit to take a shot on you. So be ready to place a wall just in case they go for that jump shot on you. But for now, practice editing those right tiles, and when you step into your peek, reset the floor. That way the enemy couldn't take a shot on you. The final peak we're going to go over is when the enemy is above you. The peak I have set up here is a bit complicated. You want to be on a ramp, have a floor above you, edit the back tile of the floor, and place another ramp above you. And then you can jump through the tile while you take a shot, and it's one of the most protected peaks in the game. It's called the Martaz peak. There are, of course, other ways to set up peaks from below. For example, you can try ramping up towards the enemy, placing a wall, and edit a window in the wall, and then it's just like a normal window peak. You can do the same thing with a peanut butter peak, a low wall. Practice doing a variety of things, and then you've completed your peak training and you're off to the next task, which is piece control behind peaks. Welcome to the third room, and this is probably going to be the most complicated one. This is the room where we finally start to piece control the enemies, but you get the insider scoop. I'm going to teach you some pro techniques to do it the best way possible. I have all the same peak scenarios set up as the previous room. Let's start with the triangle edit here. What I want you to do is position yourself so that the sentry cannot see you, just like we did for the peaks. The goal is to not get shot while piece controlling the enemy. So while you're behind this peak, try to place a cone in their box, walls around them, and a cone on top. You're probably already noticing that that left wall is hard to get without exposing yourself. Typically, when I'm piece controlling from behind a peak, I leave that wall open. But while doing it from behind a triangle edit, if you look upwards and to the left, you can still get that wall. Only if you look in the perfect spot. But practice piece controlling this first target from behind this peak on repeat and set up good peak shots and reset your wall after your shots. This is going to be the hardest part of getting this down, but I'm telling you, it's going to pay off. Once you're ready, you can move on to the windows. For a window peak, it works exactly the same. You just have to stand off to the left of your window, and then you can place the cone above and below, and the back wall and the right wall. The left wall is going to be impossible to place without exposing yourself here, but it's okay. The way I approach it is if I see the enemy going out the left, I'll try to build an entire box out the left side before they get there. Or if you see them going to the left, you could just step into the window a little bit more and place that left wall. But for now, just leave that left wall open and focus on getting all the builds from behind the peak and setting up a good peak shot. And of course, reset your wall after every shot you take. Now, while you're on this drill, I got one more tip for you. Try placing a ramp in their box instead of a cone. If you get the sentry underneath the ramp, then you can get all the walls around him. You don't need to worry about being behind the peak until you edit the ramp. Once you want to take that shot, you just set up the edit on the ramp, get behind your window peak, and take the peak shot. Give it a try and then move on to the next when you're ready. The first two options are the best way to piece control from behind a right-hand peak. If you did it behind a low wall, oftentimes your head is going to be visible while trying to place the builds. So I would scratch that off your list of practicing right now. But what I do want you to do to this spot right here is set up a normal wall with a window in it. Stand in the window and then have your cone out. Look in the dead center of your screen with the cone build out, and then gently move your crosshair up and down. Notice how you don't have to move it very much for the cone to place above you versus below you. So if you keep your crosshair somewhat pointed in the center of the screen when placing the builds, it'll help speed up the process of placing the top and bottom cone. Just a little tip for you. first two options are the best way to piece control from behind a right-hand peek. If you did it behind a low wall, oftentimes your head is going to be visible while trying to place the builds. So I would scratch that off your list of practicing right now. But what I do want you to do to this bot right here is set up a normal wall with a window in it. Stand in the window and then have your cone out. Look in the dead center of your screen with the cone build out, and then gently move your crosshair up and down. Notice how you don't have to move it very much for the cone to place above you versus below you. So if you keep your crosshair somewhat pointed in the center of the screen when placing the builds, it'll help speed up the process of placing the top and bottom cone. Just a little tip for you. Just like in the first two drills, by standing to the left of the peak here, you can place the right walls and a cone or ramp in the enemy's box. After getting the builds in the enemy's box, just step into the peak and reset the floor afterwards. In the final drill here, I have the Martaz peak set up like we talked about in the peak section. What you can try doing is after taking the peak shot through the Martaz peak, place a wall. Notice how you can look straight up through the peak and place walls a layer up. A lot of times you can catch your opponents in that piece control. The other thing you can practice doing here is ramping up towards the enemy, placing a wall, and doing the different forms of piece control we practiced earlier, like through a window or through a peanut butter edit. And like always, set up a nice peak and reset your wall after taking your shot. In this room, I'm going to try to explain to you when it's okay to actually jump into an opponent's box rather than setting up a peek. There's a few scenarios where this is okay to do, starting with this first one here. Notice how I gave you a little teammate here. If you and your teammate are ever fighting a solo, that is the first scenario where it's okay to get in, as long as if you guys are coordinated with it. You don't want to jump in alone unless you're 100% sure your teammate is right there on his other wall. Until you're 100% sure your teammate is there, just try to get good peek shots on the enemy, because you don't want to be the person that dies first and sells your teammates bread.
Foot creep, ooh.
In this room, I'm going to try to explain to you when it's okay to actually jump into an opponent's box rather than setting up a peek. There's a few scenarios where this is okay to do, starting with this first one here. Notice how I gave you a little teammate here. If you and your teammate are ever fighting a solo, that is the first scenario where it's okay to get in, as long as if you guys are coordinated with it. You don't want to jump in alone unless you're 100% sure your teammate is right there on his other wall. Until you're 100% sure your teammate is there, just try to get good shots on the enemy, because you don't want to be the person that dies first and sells your teammates bread. The second scenario where it's sometimes okay to jump in is if you're 200 HP and your opponent has 1 HP. Jumping in can help you end that fight immediately and prevent them from getting heals off, which is why it's okay. But if you ever have the opportunity to set up a peek rather than jumping in, do it, because if you jump in and you get hit for 150 damage, and a third party, a third person is rolling up to the fight, all of a sudden you're at the disadvantage and you're probably dead. Which is why it's usually better to set up a peek, but sometimes you need to jump in to end the fight. The third scenario, and this one is important. If the opponent just shot their pump shotgun, they're going to have a delay until they can shoot again. So if they ever shoot their pump, you can open a wide edit and shoot them before their pump recharges. A lot of times in pro fights, one of the biggest keys to winning the fight is that exact thing right there. They time their edits to be right after the enemy shoots. This takes a lot of practice and a lot of fighting experience, but it's a good thing to know. And the final situation is all about timing it so that the enemy is distracted. For example, let's say the enemy is boxed up spraying at a different player. You could pickaxe in the back of their box when they're not looking and maybe get a surprise attack. Or if you just piece control them so fast that they don't even have time to react, a lot of times you can get shots off before they can even realize you're there. Once again, this is something that you'll learn over time, but it's important to know. You made it to the final room, and this room is all about a thing called counter piece control. This isn't something you can necessarily practice, but it's important to know. Let's pretend in this first scenario, you walked up against the enemy's wall and they built around you super fast. Knowing that they were about to do this, you decided to build a wall to your left. That way you had an escape. That is called counter piece control. Building around you so that the enemy can't. If you ever predict that you're about to get piece controlled, try to claim one wall to your side. That way you can make a quick escape. A lot of people will try to just simply run out that side without placing the wall. That's how you end up walking into an opponent's build and getting clipped. Try to build the wall first and then edit out, and it might save your life. The second scenario here is one of my favorites. A lot of times I'll walk up against an opponent's wall, knowing that they're going to try to edit on me, maybe try to piece control me or take a shot. So I place a cone underneath me and a wall to my left. By doing this, I can flip up the cone, edit the sidewall. Now what I want you to do is stand to the left of the wood builds and reset the cone. Notice how you can use this wall as a right-hand peek. So by doing this set of moves, you gained a right-hand peek on an opponent who thought they had the advantage on you. So next time you walk up to an opponent's wall and you think they're about to box you, place a cone in the left wall, flip the cone up, edit out the side, and then reset the cone. And boom, you have a right-hand peek on them.